Welcome to the Resilience Series. I'm Stephanie Weaver, the author of the Migraine Relief Plan and the upcoming Migraine Relief Plan cookbook. I'm interviewing a variety of people about living well while managing a chronic condition. And my guest today is Margot Anderson. Margot received her master's in social work from Loyola University in Chicago. She's a certified mindfulness and meditation teacher, a Jewish educator, and yoga instructor. And she's also on the board of the National Headache Foundation. Welcome, Margot. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Stephanie.
So tell us briefly about your background and history with migraine.
I was hit by a car when I was 8 years old and was knocked unconscious. So we know that that was a traumatic brain injury. We also know that my father and his mother, paternal grandmother, both had migraine disease. And so I was genetically wired for migraine. Car accident was probably the precipitating event. I wasn't diagnosed with a migraine. I don't really remember having my first one until I was 17. Then I don't think I had another one until I was 27. And I was episodic, though I had severe migraines at that point in my life. I was episodic from age 27 to age 48. And I was in a very high-power business career during that time. And at about age 48, I started to chronify and became chronic. I don't think it was due to perimenopause or menopause. I lost my son at the age of 29. He was born with some genetic issues as well. And so I'm the adopted parent of 2 children. And we lost my son when he was 29. At that point, my migraines became much, much worse. And within the last 5 or 8 years, I've really had chronic and intractable migraine where they don't relent. So I'm beyond 22 days a month. And now we're into the CGRP realm. And I'm thrilled to be saying that I am a responder to CGRP meds. I am also fortunate to say that I was a responder in 1993 to triptans. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had a couple of the top migraine headache specialists in the world as my doctors since I was 30. So that's my migraine history.
That's your migraine history. Well, thank you for sharing. And I'm sorry, very deeply sorry for your loss of your son. It's very difficult. So thank you for sharing all of that. And so the CGRPs are the new set of medications that came out about 2 years ago. So Ajovy, Aimovig, remind me of the other 2 names.
Aimovig, there's Vyepti and Emgality.
Okay, Emgality, right. So we had 4 options and they were a brand new class of drugs. And so some people are super responders to those. And it sounds like you're one of those people, which is amazing. And especially after having so many years of the experience of it. Those drugs are only utilized for people who are deemed chronic, meaning 15 or more migraine days a month. So they're not just for people with episodic migraine. So just in case people are watching and they're not sure about those, you can certainly talk to your doctor about them, but insurance only covers them usually if you are chronic. Okay, so how did you get involved with resilience work? Tell us about that.
Graduated from NYU, went to Loyola University for my master's in social work. And then went into the business world and became a very high performer in the sales and marketing world for executive sales. By the time I was at the top of my career in data communications, I only had 1 key account. There was a lot of pressure. I was a woman in a man's world. I broke through the glass ceilings. And I hid the fact that I had migraine from everybody because it would be seen as a vulnerable weakness. And these wonderful cherry accounts would have been assigned to my male counterparts. So I'd be the one to slip off into the bathroom, throw up and go back to my desk, or I'd be the one to drive them in to a sales meeting and white knuckle drive it because my account was 2.5 hours away in each direction. So for a long time, I hid in the shadows with migraine. I was forced to retire from my high-level sales and marketing career because my migraines chronified, and I was unable to keep up with my sales and marketing position. Had to reinvent myself, pull on my resilience strings, and because of my son's issues, I became an advocate, a legal advocate for families who had children with special education needs, and started my own consulting firm and was hired by people to represent their families in the school. Still high pressure because it's an adversarial situation, but the hours were much more flexible. I could pick my own times and control my schedule, which was far more migraine friendly. So that was my first major foray into resilience, was having to reinvent myself and decide what I could do to be productive, what would give me a sense of meaning and purpose in my life, which I feel is vital, and how I would be able to be other directed and yet still be self-compassionate and take care of myself and my migraine disease. Fast forward, I was in that career for 22 years, and about, I want to say 7 or 8 years ago, I took mindfulness-based stress reduction. It was life-changing. And I started to devote my time and energy to researching the neuroscience for positive psychology. And it was a combination of all those things and yoga and that mindset of acceptance, practicing what is, living mindfully in the moment, that really changed my thinking about how I could relate to my pain and manage pain and still live a productive life. So that's when I switched my career and my practice towards helping people learn resilience skills, because they can be directly taught, and change their life.
That's great. And so was it in that time period that you created your website, creating-resilience.com?
It was.
Okay.
And I still have on there that I do special education advocacy. And my passion right now is working with people in chronic pain, people who have chronic illness, and people who have mental health issues. My son also had mental health issues. I was the chairman of a board of the largest nonprofit in the state of Illinois that worked with people who had severe and persistent mental illness. So that's always been a passion of mine as well.
So when did you feel, was there a point at which you went from patient to advocate in your life? And do you feel like that's a part of your wellness journey, is becoming an advocate for others?
So aside from other things that have happened to me, like benign brain tumors and a couple of bowel obstructions, some really significant medical challenges, the migraine disease was always humming just below the surface. I never really took the time or energy to see how much migraine was sucking out of my life. It wasn't until I developed breast cancer 4.5 years ago. And all of a sudden, I was watching all of my friends, many of whom are also breast cancer survivors, and the doctors. Everybody was talking about breast cancer, offering help, wanting to bring food over, wanting to reach out. It was totally acceptable to tell people about that. I realized, wow, what a difference between living in the breast cancer world and living as a patient or a person with migraine disease. And at that point, I said, I need to do more to bring education to the world about migraine disease. And I need to do more to empower people to understand that they are not only a person living with a chronic illness, they're not only a person who may be living with a very disabling illness, but they are also a person of great agency and power that has a voice, that can tell a story, that can influence their legislators. And so I started to just network and call all the agencies that are working with migraine people. Go online, there's so many wonderful organizations. And then I attended Headache on the Hill last year through the National Headache Foundation sponsoring me. And my eyes have been opened that I want this particular chronic illness to come out of the shadows like breast cancer did.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I really appreciate you drawing the distinction between sort of socially acceptable illnesses to have and those that are not really seen as acceptable. And so there's such a stigma around migraine. People think they're faking, it's just a headache. They really don't understand the difference between headache and migraine, and that the headache that they might have after a stressful day is nothing at all like the illness that we both share and so many people share. But, even earlier in your story, when you talked about how you had this very high powered job and you hid it from everyone and going into the bathroom, throwing up, and then coming back out and going back to work. I think there's a lot of people who can relate to that, unfortunately. And so I really appreciate your advocacy around making it something that is acceptable. And I also think that, my experience has been people are much more interested in supporting someone when they're going through a short-term crisis than a long-term situation, right? I don't know if it's like attention span or whatever. So, when I had a spinal fusion surgery, and so I got a ton of support. People, again, like you said, like brought flowers, brought food, what can we do for you? And you're wearing a back brace and people can see, are you getting better? But you don't get that when you have an illness that lasts for 30 years, 40 years, right? People just assume you're okay, or you don't talk about it, or maybe you do talk about it and they get tired of hearing about it. So I appreciate you drawing those distinctions. I think that's been really helpful. What do you want people with migraine to know about resilience? Let's talk a little bit more about that. Some of the strategies that you teach and have seen to be helpful for yourself as well.
When people hear the things that I've been through in life, they look at me and they're like, "Oh my goodness, you're like the resilience queen.
Right.
You must have been born with, the mother lode of resilience genes." But here's what we know. What we know is maybe 1/3 of our resilience is how we're hardwired. And we talk about something called our telomeres, which are like shoelaces on the end of our DNA strand, those little plastic shoelace caps that we have. Some people have longer ones, some people have shorter ones. If you have a lot of stress in your life, you can erode them down to short ones, meaning you erode your resilience. If you practice resilience strategies, you actually can grow those little capsules at the end of your DNA strand and increase your resilience. So here's what we know. We know, and the research has shown, that you can change your brain. We used to think the brain was formed at age 5, back in the dinosaur age when I went to graduate school. But we now know that there's something called experience-dependent neuroplasticity. We learn from our experiences, and we learn throughout the entire lifespan that we're alive and breathe. So to that end, you can change your brain. You can change how you respond in a moment of panic and anxiety. You can change your level of depression. We know that there are things that we can do to mitigate adversity when it hits us. And we know that there are things that we can do to promote well-being. And so I love the fact that there are things that we can do, actually do, that can change our brain.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think the science that has grown and shifted in the last 15 years, that we know so much more than we used to know, is really exciting. And it is hopeful for those of us who will probably always, at some level, live with this chronic condition. So tell us a little bit more about your own personal self-care strategy and how those build your resilience.
Um, I do want to mention that since 1990, there has been a whole body of research that is called post-traumatic growth. And it counteracts the theories that when you go through a trauma, as many of us do, whether it's trauma with a small t or trauma with a capital T, um, that somebody is going to develop post-traumatic stress disorder. It is far more likely that you'll experience a trauma, whether it's small or large, because there's no adversity-free life. There's no pain-free life in this human existence. It's far more likely that you'll go through it, experience, shock, denial, anger, perhaps depression. But we now know that it is a growth opportunity for your life, that you can learn from that. You might even have to redefine your life, as I did, completely change careers, completely reevaluate a friendship, completely reevaluate a marital situation, completely reevaluate so many different things, but that you can not only bounce back, but bounce forward. So I think about that all the time. When I was in sales and marketing, I learned from a wonderful presenter never to see failure as failure, but only as the opportunity to change course. So when we feel that we have a medication that's not working or a treatment plan that's not working, no matter what's on the treatment plan, it's within our power to go to our provider, our doctor, our partner, whatever it is, and say, this isn't working. Let's try some other course correction, some combination and permutation of other medications or other lifestyle changes. If exercising is too hard, go for a slow walk. So I see resilience through that post-traumatic growth lens all the time. In terms of particular self-care strategies, there's also a growing body of evidence about self-compassion. And self-compassion, as it's defined by Dr. Kristen Neff, Neff, is an exploding area. We know that practicing self-compassion, which means being truly kind to yourself, changes the brain. So we know we all are born with our little inner critic, which sits on our shoulder and yammers away at us. That's the result of 600 million years of practice in our reptilian brain for fight, flight, and freeze. And our inner critic is trying to keep us safe. Of course, when the inner critic starts telling us that our pants are too tight and don't look well, that's when the inner critic is getting a little bit out of control compared to when we used to have it back on the African savanna as we were scanning for lions and tigers in the brush. That's your reptilian brain kind of going amok. So there are things that we can do now, which include practicing self-compassion. I maintain a gratitude practice where I come up with 3 things, specific, vivid items in the last 24 hours, and they can't be the same thing. Can't say I love my dog. It has to be something different and vivid Maybe it's imagining a plate of food that you had and all the colors on it. But some 3 things that you are grateful for. I like to use the analogy, but it dates me. Back in the day when we all had Rolodexes, you would flip through the file to find somebody's name and address. Well, what you're doing when you scan for gratitude is you're asking your brain to flip through all of the activities it's gone through in the last 24 hours, and you're scanning for the good. We are like Velcro for negativity, and we're like Teflon for positivity. Somebody tells you how great you look, it'll slide right off. Somebody tells you your hair's out of place, you'll remember that all day long. So we want to counteract the negative thoughts we have. As a person with migraine and any chronic illness, we have what I call ants crawling around in our brain. The ANT stands for automatic negative thoughts. We all have them. It's what our brains do as humans. And we want to counteract the negative ones with positive ones. So gratitude practice is definitely a part of that. And then finally, I practice radical acceptance every day. I may not like the situation that I'm in. I may not like having a chronic illness or 2 or 3, depending on who you are, but I can't change that. What I can change, if I accept the reality of what is, I can change my relationship with these things. I can change my relationship with pain. Instead of it consuming me and burning me up, I can keep it at an arm's length through mindfulness, through meditation. They don't have to be long meditation practices. You can do it 3 minutes twice a day. And the frequency with which we flex this mindfulness muscle really helps us to stay more resilient, present in the present moment, accept and embrace the impermanence of our illness, the fact that chronic pain changes minute to minute, and we can embrace what is.
Great. Thank you so much. Margot, thank you for being here today and sharing your story. Please visit creating-resilience.com to follow Margot and learn more about her offerings. I'm assuming you have a lot of virtual offerings these days?
I do.
Okay, awesome. Check out other episodes of the Resilience series on Facebook Watch, IGTV, and YouTube. Follow me at sweavermph to learn more about my upcoming book, The Migraine Relief Plan Cookbook, which will be out in spring 2022 from Surrey Books. Margot, thanks again for being here.
Thanks, Stephanie. Good luck with the book.
Thank you.